welcome back to the second episode of our weekly hang with Nick Granville, all the way from Wellington, myself in Auckland. How are you doing this evening, Nick? Not too bad, I hope.
Doing very good, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad at all. How were your gigs on the weekend? You have some.
I had a blues gig on the Friday night,
Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
which was fun. The 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 band was made up of sort of, let's just say, some professionals and some who are sort of on the tail end of their career,
Okay.
which is fine. That was all good fun.
Yeah.
But some people were struggling and some people were doing fine. But we played, and you know what it's like, the sound of the blues
Yeah.
club and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was fun, man. We went some places and played some cool tunes, so that was good. And
Cool.
then yeah, I'm sorry if my eye looks a little bit red. I
Nice.
got sunscreen in my eye today, and it's been stinging all day.
Oh,
So
dear.
I'm not wasted even if I look it.
Yeah, that's no fun when that happens. Did you get to use an amp for your blues gig?
I take the fractal.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they have that little deluxe in there, as you know. But man, the last time I turned up, it wasn't in house,
Yeah.
and I was like, and so they're like, oh, we've only got a Pro Junior,
Right. Oh, okay.
and man, you no way that's gonna like survive with how loud the band's playing there. So I was like,
Yeah.
so I just take the fractal, and they've got a really nice powered Yamaha speaker. I just go direct to the front of house, and it
Okay.
works great.
No fuss.
No fuss, and at least I know it's consistent. It's like every time I'm there, I
Yeah.
got the same amp set up and the same.
Right.
What about you? How was your gig with Kat?
Oh, it was good. I got there. We had a different bass player this time, the brilliant Alex Griffiths on bass. And
Oh, great.
if you've played with him, he can sometimes sound like an organ. He's got like a bigger pedal board than I do. The first time I was like, oh, the bass player's got more pedals. But yeah, Alex is awesome. So it was basically there's two dining establishments right across the road from each other. So they wanted to keep it down on the first set and like play some chilled out stuff. So, I've been through those before, right? So I told
Mm-hmm.
him, okay, so our aim is gonna be you're gonna have to come and tell us to turn it up. So then I
Mm-hmm.
think he was happy with that. And then we never had an issue. In fact, at some point in the second set, they told us you can, turn it back up because the other place has closed down. So
It was a cafe. It was a cafe, wasn't it?
yeah, so it's
Mm.
basically they hold a bunch of gigs there. I got Nathan Haynes that sometimes played there, and my friend Johnny Blair, another great guitar player. So they've been quite regular with live music, especially on the Friday and Saturday. So for some reason they don't want a whole band in there. They much prefer like a smaller setup. So, with
That's cool, though, right?
bass guitar, and Cat sometimes plays guitar, and sometimes he just sings. But it was nice playing off him because Alex is a bass player, he really knows his harmony. So it was
Oh yeah.
cool, just playing off that, because sometimes like with just the bass player, when you're soloing, you kind of have to create the harmony yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And with him, like he was actually playing full chords at some point, and I was like, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
cool. And then when he took a solo at one point, and I just covered on I was like, I told him the next time I'll probably put an octave pedal in as well, and then I can actually hold down that low end when you drop out, just
Ah,
to solo. But yeah, it was a good gig. People were listening. That was what I liked the most about it. Like they would just sometimes spontaneously clap in the middle of a solo and stuff like that. Which is like very hard to find in these kind of situations. Not like so
it's
much
a
as
radical concept, isn't it?
it is, yeah.
That people are there to listen.
Yeah, and at some point they got up and they danced, and they had a good time. And the best part is like the gig's done at 11:30, and you're home in bed by midnight,
Perfect.
like
Perfect.
Cinderella. Gotta get home in time.
We're such old men, aren't we? Where we don't
Oh
want to be out
man,
late anymore. We don't want to carry the big heavy amps
yeah.
anymore.
I
We want
mean,
our lives to be easy.
yeah. I mean that amp which I took, the Spider Valve, it's got casters, some heavy duty ones which I put on it. So most of the time I'm just pushing it along.
Mm.
And I managed to find a nice little carry case, like one of those Pelican style ones that
Hmm.
that I found online. It fit the Pedal Train Junior perfectly. So,
Oh, great.
yeah, well, like
And you ran
everything.
your Helix into it, didn't you? Is that what you were doing?
Yeah, no, it's got a bunch of analog pedals that are controlled by a Boss ES5, and then the ES5 also controls the HX Stomp via MIDI.
Ah,
So on the HX Stomp, I'm just doing a couple of amp models and some delay and reverb and maybe some shimmer every now
yeah,
and then. And I think actually having your analog pedals in front of a model amp is quite a cool thing because your guitar's seeing the analog pedals first and
yeah.
then hitting the first stage in the modeler. So, it's almost like it's buffering it in a way.
I do the same. I
Yeah,
sometimes put my either my dude pedal or my BB preamp or my OCD or something like that
right.
into the front of the amp,
Hmm.
into the front of the modeler, I should say. And
Yeah,
so, as far as the modeler knows, it's getting hit with a distorted guitar. And as you said, it
yeah,
acts as a buffer and a sort of a and
yeah.
compresses in a certain type of way, doesn't it? It's interesting.
Yeah. And another thing is, I used to find, especially in the earlier days, the modelers had a problem when you dropped your guitar volume and you went down like really low. And
Mm,
then it had trouble, dealing with that really low input level. As long as your guitar was on full, it was fine. But
mm-hmm.
then what happens is when you run it into a pedal with a boost, for example, it's almost like that sends a slightly higher level, especially if you're, boosting past unity. And then you don't seem to have that trouble because the pedal handles your guitar volume going down.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just passes on a more stable signal, I guess, to the
Yeah,
modeler.
it's probably buffering it, like you said.
Yeah.
The fractals are interesting like that because they really do. They're the best I've found of the modelers in terms of doing that.
Hmm.
I haven't tried a quad cortex, but I've tried the Kemper and I've tried the Helix and all that. But in terms of like because a lot of times one of my favorite sounds, as I've mentioned, is the Marshall thing.
Hmm.
But that's with the volume up on full. But
Right.
I often ride it at 6.
Hmm.
But you can see
Yeah.
that's on 2 or 3. It's still feeling like an amp would in terms of that control.
Yeah.
And I think that's one thing that Fractal have probably got the market on
Hmm.
in terms of doing that. But like I said, I haven't tried a quad cortex. Have you been keeping up with the NAM show updates and things?
I did actually. Today, the one I wanted to see was the new Friedman Plexi.
Mm,
So I think Andertons did cover that, and I did get to hear a little clip. It's kind of very brown sound in a way, but he
yep.
did mention that he's put bright switches on both the channels
Mm,
and selectable ones, so which you could use the normal channel as well with a Strat, for example, and just add some brightness, and you still get like nice thick low end, which like the
yeah.
early Marshalls had. So that's something that's interesting. I mean, I don't think I'll ever be in the market for one, but I just think it's cool to have
Keep an eye on it.
options. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I watched a few videos about that amp as well because I was kind of interested in it as well. And I think he designed it off his '68 original Plexi that he
Yeah,
has, or something like that.
yeah,
But he talked about how he bridged the channels internally, so you
internally.
don't have to use a jumper cable.
Yeah,
And he put a Variac in it.
he did. Yeah,
And I was like, so someone's been thinking about Eddie Van Halen, right?
yep. I think Sir does that Variac as well. They
Oh,
have
do they?
that. Yeah, they have that switch, and they've also got the switchable bright caps. In
Mm,
fact, when Sir modded this Marshall, which is a late 70s or early 80s 2203, not the one just before the JCM 800, it's the same circuit, different
yeah.
cosmetics. So he said, "Do you use the low gain channel?" I said, "No, not much." He said, "Do you want me to put a three-way bright there?" So that'll be cool, and that's the first time I ever heard about it. And I
Ah,
think it's a really useful thing because then, like with the Strat, for example, you'd want a different bright cap value, and then on a humbucker like a Les Paul, you'd want a
exactly.
little bit more aggressive, just to bring that top end up, which I think
Hmm.
is a brilliant thing. I think every amp should actually have, at least the ones that have bright caps should probably,
Totally. And also having the two inputs, so you've got a higher gain and a low, 6
mm,
dB down input. Some amps like my Mesa Boogie back there, the Nomad just has one input.
yep,
And then if you go from say a Strat to a humbucker guitar,
mm,
it's like all of a sudden the humbucker guitar is like way louder and
louder.
clipping it in a different kind of way.
Yeah.
I mean, that can be cool, but I kind of like
That's a
having.
useful topic we should probably touch upon. Like, how do you handle like using a single rig and like a few different guitars on a gig where you don't have time to go and dial your amp in?
Yeah, so nowadays I don't tend to do that so much because I just I try and do the whole thing on one guitar as much as
Hmm.
possible, um, unless I do like absolutely have to swap. Like there's a certain thing that I just can't get on anything else. Um, in which case I'll just usually set up a patch and have it, I've got a button on my fractal that's dedicated to a 4 dB boost.
Okay.
Basically, whenever I play single coils, I kick that in and it
Mm-hmm.
balances it out. But I used to do the same thing with amps a lot with my Bassman, and I've still got that. I've got one of those Spark pedals, the TC Electronic.
Yep.
And I'd set that to sort of Unity would be the humbucker guitar, and then I would hit the Spark to not as a boost for solos, but more to balance between the two guitars.
Right.
The other one, the most useful way of doing it, though, I found is to use the old Boss EQ pedal.
Mm-hmm.
And just goose the volume a touch till you get the single coils to balance out with it. But you can also sometimes, single coils can sometimes, if you've gone from a humbucker guitar, you can just be a bit thin.
Yeah.
So you can just goose a little bit of the bottom end in it, and I quite like doing that too. That's the best way I've found to do it.
Yeah. I'm probably a little more lazy when it comes to that. So all I do is I just turn down the volumes on the humbucker guitars.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I always end up using low output pickups, so there's plenty of sparkle even on like the the Gibson. So it's when you use those high output pickups, then when you turn the volume down, it just goes like you can't hear any clarity whatsoever. So
yeah, well, I'm a big fan of low output pickups too. Generally, I think I have my AZ is the only one that has a higher output pickup in it, which was Mr. Glenn Evans made me one, and he it's basically a PAF but plus 5%.
Right.
So it's not even really high gain either. Yeah. You know what I mean? But these are the Ibanez Super 58s, which are some of my favorite pickups, and they're basically like PAF kind of. I've measured them when they're out of the guitar, and they're about 7.5, 8K, somewhere in that range. Some of them are down nearer to 7, but they're not definitely not hot pickups.
Yeah.
And same with Strat pickups. I like the lower output Strat pickups. Generally, I like it lower output. I think they're more lower output pickups are more dynamic, I find.
Yeah, for sure.
If you want more gain, you just turn it up on the drive on the amp.
Yeah. Though I have to say, like sometimes like on a Strat, like a high output humbucker, like a JB or something, that's fun to play because it's like naturally compressing that much. It just makes it like really easy to just dig into it. With a like you said, because of the increased dynamic range on low output pickups, you have to be a little more careful, in how you pick and stuff like that, because you'll hear when you make a mistake, or if you mispick a note, you'll hear it loud and clear. Whereas sometimes the high output pickup would gloss over it. And,
yeah, exactly.
And another thing is like on guitars that have two volumes, like a Les Paul, for example, I like doing a 50s wiring on the neck pickup and a 60s on the bridge, because generally bridge pickups, I always find them a bit too harsh to start with, just the way I dial my amp. So I always end up rolling a little bit of volume or a little bit of tone off. But when you turn that volume down to say around 8 or something, that makes the bridge humbucker sound a lot more smoother. You don't want that on the neck humbucker. You want all that clarity. And the only thing is, the downside of the 50s wiring is when you turn your tone knob down, you actually lose volume as well. And typically on a neck pickup, I don't do that. I just have the tone knob on full. So it doesn't really make a difference. But when you turn that volume down, you have that nice sparkle and clarity on it.
Man, that's a smart way of doing it. I've never thought of doing that. The two different wirings for the two different...
I can show it to you, actually, if you want. I've got the Les Paul handy. The time it takes to do that. Anyway, so that's your bridge pickup, right? That's full volume, and you drop it down to, like, say, 8 or something. It's warmed up a bit.
Definitely.
Yeah, now that's your bridge... your neck pickup. That's full, and you take it down. You can hear that. It's like super clear. And then when you go in between, well, that's way out of tune, but yeah, you get the idea.
Yeah. Did you see that pedal show the other day with Dan and Mick, and they did a Mick's got a new guitar, an ES 345, yeah. And he talked about why they're out of phase in that middle position.
Yeah, because of the stereo amp.
Because of the stereo amp. I never thought about that. Like I've seen a few 345s that I've played before, but they've been rewired to be like a 335,
That's why I think they said, will it survive the variotone?
Yeah.
overly change it back,
Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze there for a second. Um, it's funny what's happened with my eye being a bit funny. 'Cause like I said, I got sunscreen in my eye today because I got quite burnt on my neck a couple of weeks ago. I'm really being really careful about putting sunscreen on.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, when I got burnt, I actually had sunscreen on, but I think it was faulty, but it's sort of doing something with my sinuses too.
Yeah.
So please forgive me sounding like I'm sick. I'm not actually sick.
Though it is okay to be sick. That's no problem with that.
Oh, no, I'm not. I feel fine.
Yeah. Here's the
Yeah.
song. Apparently he got that riff from some old blues song which I was listening to on YouTube. I was like, oh, they must have nicked some stuff as well.
I think there was a lot of that stuff was stolen from other places, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the Stones stuff.
Yeah.
You know, you
The one that shocked me was Black Knight by Deep Purple, coming from that Ricky Nelson Summertime. That's the Ricky Nelson riff, and
and they just
it's pretty much the same thing, isn't it? Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because if you do that, right? If you go, oh, you're an E flat.
Oh yeah, I'm an E flat. Sorry. Yeah.
Or you go.
Yeah.
They're essentially, for the most part, the same kind of thing, aren't they? So is that a breach of copyright? I kind of think it is. You know what I mean? You should. But that's sort of been tested a bit lately, right? With like that Ed Sheeran case and things. And I know some people have some very mixed feelings about that Ed Sheeran thing, but it's kind of interesting. I think the law around copyright is pretty murky.
Yeah,
don't you think the same thing?
Yeah, because I look at it also as this way, like, as long as they don't copyright chord progressions, I think you should be okay. Once they start copywriting chord progressions, then you're like, oh, okay, then.
But that's what's interesting about the Ed Sheeran one, right? Because it was often said that it was only the chord progression he copied, but it really wasn't.
It wasn't. It
right?
was more than that.
It was way more than that. Like when I first heard it, I remember hearing it and thinking, gee, that's just exactly like that Marvin Gaye tune, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what he'd done is he'd taken the chord progression, he'd taken the same bass line.
Mm-hmm.
A buddy of mine who's a drummer said, man, it's the exact same snare sound too.
Right.
And which I hadn't occurred to me, so I listened to them both side by side, and I'm like, yeah, it's the same snare sound. I mean, sure, the second chord, I think one of them is F sharp minor, and one is D over F sharp. For the most part, the same, right?
Yeah.
So essentially what he did was create a new track. Sorry, put a new melody over an existing track. So he essentially re-recorded the track.
Yeah.
But it didn't breach copyright, right?
No.
He won the case.
Yeah.
I think it was pretty smart of them to put Ed Sheeran up on the stand because he's a likable guy and he's famous, and of course they're going to side with him after that, aren't they? He's Ed Sheeran, and they'll all go, oh, we can't put the nice guy Ed Sheeran in jail or fine him or whatever.
Yeah.
But I found it interesting because it's sort of, it opens the floodwaters. So I've got this new original song. You might have heard it before. It goes. I'm going to put a new melody over it, but it's going to be that with the same bass line and the same drum part.
I can't tell you how many times, like as a session guitar player, I've been given a riff as a reference and said that's the vibe we want, but you obviously can't play that because of copyright reasons. So now, just change it and make it something different, which is close enough to have the vibe of that, but not enough to get, to hold up in a court of law. And
I had the same thing with a certain TV show that was being filmed in Auckland. They asked me to do a session for it. The money was crap, and there was no way I was ever going to play a TV show for that sort of money they were offering. But one of the things they requested was that I change the part by about 10% to get around copyright. And I'm like, come on. I was like, for one, where's your chat? Why aren't you writing the music? Why? Because they wanted me to transcribe it as well.
Okay.
So they were paying a session fee of like $150, which is not worth it. But I also had to transcribe the song and record it in my studio, and I was like, hell no, not for that sort of money. But yeah, it was interesting. They had that clause say change it by 10% to get around copyright.
Yes, sometimes I've taken 3 days in the studio just to give them I don't know. They have sometimes that much of time and the inclination to go into the deep end, into the weeds, and pull something out. So I'm like, cool, that mean no skin off my back. I'll keep playing riffs till you're happy.
Yeah, 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 totally. And I don't think there's anything wrong with like drawing influence, right?
Yeah,
But when you blatantly copy, it's sort of like, you know what I mean? To me, it gets a little bit murky.
yeah,
But hey, if they can get away with it,
yeah.
it's all good.
I'll tell you a funny story. Like when my first band, we used to like sometimes we played predominantly original music, but once in a while we'd like to do a cover. But if we
Hmm.
did a cover, we would, try to like change it. And sometimes we would create these things for ourselves. Now, what if this artist played that song? How would they play it? So
Nah.
one of them was how would Stevie Ray Vaughan play Roxanne by the Police?
Oh yeah.
So the one I came up with was, something like that. And we actually did like the whole cover, with that. And it turned out to be one of like the nicer moments in the set. Like people would actually wait for us to play that cover and became a thing. It's like it just came from, a stupid
Have you heard
exercise like
Have
that.
you heard George Michael do that song?
Oh no, I haven't. I'll check
He
that
does
out.
it, and it's in G minor, I think, and
Yeah.
it's um, or D minor, it could be. We were supposed to play it on Friday night,
Hmm.
on that blues gig because the
Okay.
singer likes to do that version of it. But he plays it as a ballad,
Okay.
and with a full symphony orchestra, it's stunning. Actually, it's really a nice version of that song and great bass line. It's pretty cool.
He probably had Phil Palmer on that one as well. I think Phil did a lot of the George Michael sessions.
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
He talks
Yeah,
about it.
he was an amazing singer. Wow, I mean, that Queen thing that he did, with the Somebody
Exactly.
to Love,
Yep.
it's like,
That's the thing.
man,
My mom watched the whole concert, and after she said they should have just got George Michael to replace
do the
Freddie.
whole lot. Yeah. Are you a fan of Brian May,
Oh
or
yeah,
does
man.
he?
Big
Yeah.
time fan. Like I used to go pretty deep into the Queen stuff, like all that second album and all those there's a lovely song called Bijou on the Innuendo album where he does this tapping kind of thing. I think he was listening to a bit of Eddie Van Halen at that time or whatever. But yeah, he's always struck me as the kind of guy who never got like lighter as he got older. He still retained
Yeah,
that rock edge and that, you know,
totally.
yeah. And I also think, I mean, he was pretty lucky to have a singer like Freddie,
Oh yeah,
because it added a totally different dimension to the music. So it was kind of like the Lennon McCartney thing as well.
and the piano playing.
Yeah, exactly. And
Freddie's piano playing was like people don't realize just how good a piano player he
yeah.
was. It's ridiculous.
Apparently, a lot of their basic tracks were just piano, drums, and bass, and then they
Hmm.
would add the guitars and all later. Because even Bohemian Rhapsody, the basic track is drums, bass, and piano. And if
Yep.
you listen to the multi-track right at the end, where it goes anyway the wind blows, whoosh, and then you can hear Freddie take his hands off the keyboard and scores like something. Oh, like fuck, that was long or something.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that was shit. Well, I think
Yeah.
he says that was shit. We're gonna have
Yeah,
to do that
do it
again.
again or something like that. Yeah, but it's pretty
Yeah.
awesome. But like even in the bits, there's no click track first of all. But all those
Mm,
bits in the middle, it's the piano that's keeping the time, and the whole structure of the
totally.
song. It's like that's
And
the
his sense of rhythm was ridiculous, wasn't it? It was
ridiculous. Yeah,
like
totally.
so, but it was a magic group really because it was the whole band. I mean, Roger Taylor too. Those vocals that Roger Taylor hit, the high notes and stuff.
Yep.
I was like, they just had some magic between the group of them. So it was pretty special. And surprisingly, George Michael just slotted right in, and he said something came over him that night that he just felt his music go to another level he hadn't really experienced before. So it was pretty cool because
There was
he's a hell
some
of a singer.
there was some cool other moments from that concert as well. I remember Axl Rose doing something with Elton John. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, I think it was Axl and Elton that did Bohemian Rhapsody, if I'm not mistaken.
oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got to play. I've played Queen a bunch with the orchestra here in Wellington, and when the band Queen played the stadium in Wellington, I couldn't go because I had a gig,
Okay.
of course. But the night before, the orchestra decided to do an outdoor concert playing Queen's music. So this is the day before the actual band Queen were going to play in Wellington. We were going to be like a covers band orchestra doing Queen stuff. But I'm so glad it didn't go ahead because it was that they decided that they didn't no amps on stage,
Right.
right? So and we got told this like the day before. So me and the bass player, I don't know who decided this because it wasn't the orchestra. I think it might have been the sound guy decided and put his foot down. So we're like, okay, sweet ass. So I bought, I don't think I had the fractal at the time. Maybe I did. I took whatever I had, and then the bass player was going to go direct. And then we get there, and there's no monitors.
Okay.
And I'm like, so how does anyone else on stage hear us? How does the conductor hear us, you know? And they said, well, that's why you have the conductor. Everybody just follows the conductor. And I'm like, oh, no, 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 no. We still got to be able to hear and blend. And I'm like, so I said, well, how do the string players play in tune?
Yeah.
Because they're literally, all they're going to hear is drums and themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, oh, no, they're pretty good at finding pitch by themselves. I'm like, no, 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 no. No, this isn't how it goes. But it was one of those notorious windy Wellington days.
Okay.
And so the wind got up too high and they called the gig and said, nah, it's too unsafe to go ahead. And I'm like, yes. Because it was going to be a disaster. I could just see it, you know.
Yeah. The funny thing about doing a Queen tribute set, that's kind of like how I met my wife actually, because I got a call the day before the gig saying, hey, can you show up at so and so time and learn all these Queen songs? I'm like, yeah, I already know most of them, but yeah, I can do some, homework. But why such short notice? They said, oh no, the guitar player who was supposed to play dropped out or he fell ill or something like that. We need a replacement at the last moment. And then I walked into the gig because I remember taking my ES335 because I knew I wanted a red guitar and a Sir Badger, which I had at the time. But I knew like for a couple of solos I needed a phaser pedal, so I called a mate and said like, "Yo, I need to borrow your phaser, so I'm going to send a runner to pick it up." So he said, "Yeah." So I go to find the production manager, and it was this girl, and we hit it off really well, and ended up
Oh,
getting
there you go.
getting married. But it turns out like when I told her my friend's name, she already knew him. She knew most of my friends because while I was in New Zealand, she had like run into them, and so it was kind of we fit into each other's lives pretty easily at the time. But
Oh,
yeah,
that's awesome.
if it wasn't for the Queen tribute gig,
So Queen has a special place in your life, for sure.
oh yeah, for sure.
So I'm curious, when you played that Queen stuff, do
Yeah.
you try and sound like Brian May, or do you like? It's interesting because when I did it, I remember someone posted a video, and
Yeah.
this guy said, "Oh, I used to work with Queen back when I lived in England, and you sound nothing like Brian May." And I'm like, "Good, I know, I'm not Brian May." And at the time, I used my Bassman and I forget what pedal I was using to get the distortion sound, But I was
Yeah.
like, this was another Queen because I've done the Queen thing with the orchestras quite a bit.
Right.
But it was interesting because I thought, what do you want me to turn up with an AC30 and a red special and a treble booster and do that? Because it's not what I do,
Yeah.
right? I don't think that's the point, and it's to me that wouldn't be that inspiring to do anyway. I do what I do,
Yeah.
and I'd adjust it, and I get it in the ballpark of the right kind of sound, and then be off, No, I'm not trying to be Brian May.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, should I put a wig on and a get up,
No, the thing you need to have is the sixpence coin.
Yeah, exactly.
It actually
Have you ever
does.
tried it?
I did, but it shreds the strings, man. So like, I did it once on an old set of strings, and I was like, well, that's fine. I know what it does, but yeah, I'm not inclined to be.
Even more so on elixirs, right? Or some kind of coated string would be terrible. What I found was interesting was when you use the coin, it
Yeah.
kind of shaves little bits of metal off your coin
Yeah.
or off your string, and they stick to the magnets of your guitar.
Yep.
And they're almost impossible to get all of them off.
Yeah.
Because bits going everywhere, and it was such a pain in the butt. I was like, I'm never doing this again.
Yeah, you can probably maybe get away with it on EMG pickups or something like that. With the
Yeah, well, he was using Burns pickups, so they
Yep.
were the ones that came in of like I think most of the hardware came out of a Burns guitar, and then the body of the guitar, as I'm sure you know, he built
Yep.
out of the fireplace and all of that. But
Yep.
the Burns guitars, I don't remember ever hearing any of them that I liked. They were. I remember them being really bright and trebly, like overly nastily so. But maybe that's where in designing the guitar, Brian kind of made it. It's because it's semi-hollow inside.
Yeah.
And you know.
Yeah, I think he said it was intentionally designed to feedback instead of,
Mm,
getting rid of it. But I think like also his, the pickups where they go out of phase and stuff like that with each
hmm
other, that's a critical part because if you actually do the phase canceling on even a Strat pickup, which you can't do normally unless you put, three toggle toggle switches,
hmm
once you do that, a lot of the sounds start, making sense, and then you realize, okay, that's like the outer phaseness cancels out all these frequencies and it pushes that high mid, all the. I think what happens is also like the fundamental of the note gets canceled and all the harmonics get pushed up,
Yeah,
so it has that very singing quality almost.
and the
And
mid-range,
yeah,
it becomes all mid-range, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting how phase works, isn't it? A lot of musicians don't really understand or think about phase. I had a gig a couple of weeks ago with my trio, and the whole gig I was thinking, man, the key, it's with Leo playing keys
hmm,
and Jacob Randall, and man, most of the gig there was like no bottom end in the keys, and he couldn't figure out why. He was trying to mess around with it, and then afterwards what he realized was when he turned one of his speakers off, all of a sudden there was all this bottom end
bottom
that
end
came
came
back
back.
because he had two mismatched speakers and they
Hmm.
were out of phase with each other, and they
Yep,
were essentially canceling out all the low end, and so he just had mid-range honky like this,
right.
and it kind of like the whole gig it was doing his head, and he was like going, what the hell's going wrong? And it was just two speakers out of
Out of
phase. And
phase. I can't tell you the number of times I've gotten a rental twin reverb with the two speakers out of phase because someone's just gone and, played around with
interesting.
the thing and they flipped it the wrong way. And then the
hmm
moment you, swap it back, boom, it's like, oh, what did you do? You fixed my amp. I was like, no, man, I just put your speakers back in phase. But here's another thing, like on a twin, like the normal channel and the vibrato channel are out of phase with each other. The only
right,
Fender amp in which they're both in phase, I think, is the Bassman, which is
right,
why
I
you
never thought
can
about that.
which is why you can jumper them. But one guy taught me this trick, like where you jumper the two channels of a twin, and you set the tremolo on. So now when the tremolo pulses your vibrato channel, it's like varying the amount of signal that's phasing out with the normal one. So it
And you wouldn't
almost
need that much tremolo, would you?
no, you can, and the thing is, you can balance the volumes, so you get this like pseudo univibe kind of thing going on.
Oh, cool.
It's pretty trippy, but the reason I bring this up is like if you were ever to run a Marshall and a Fender twin together, like on a two amp setup,
hmm
the normal channel would most likely be in phase with the Marshall,
Right.
and the vibrato is I know this for like certain is like on the 800 and the 900 because those are the most common
Mm.
rentals on Marshalls. But then you've got like some amp switch channel switch, and when they
Yeah.
switch channels they flip the phase. So
hmm
at one point, like on this channel, you're in phase, and then you switch it and it's out of phase. So you used to get this box that RGM made called the Why Not, and that was like a programmable. You could program the phase shift on
oh,
on the thing. So like if you want to patch where the amps were out of phase, you could just hit that, or I've got the old Layla, what's it called, the P split, very passive little box. So
hmm
every time like I need to flip the phase, I just have
yeah.
that
I've got
to
a radial big shot for that
yeah,
same thing. It's got a phase switch that's super handy for
exactly.
that. But I don't run two amps anymore very often.
Uh-huh.
Very rarely do I get the opportunity to do that. But it's interesting too because gets into the same thing with microphones too, right?
Yeah.
Like I know so many people, they're like, okay, we're going to use a 57 and a Royer 121 on your guitar cab, and I'm like, okay, well let's have a look,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden the phase is wrong. They've got it, they've not thought about the fact that the capsule, the capsule of the microphone is actually slightly back from
Yeah.
the front of the, and so therefore they're out by this much on
Yeah.
their microphone placement, and it's not quite right. But then that creates other problems too, because to get the 57 sounding good, you want it real close because of the proximity
Yeah.
makes up for the bottom end that's missing in a 57, right? But a Royer doesn't want to be as close. So I'm like, just use one mic,
Yeah.
get it done, and we'll just use a 57 most of the time is,
There is a
it's the
there is a
sound.
trick to put them into phase that an engineer taught me. He said you put them out of phase to start with, and then you just
hmm
move the mics till you get the maximum amount of cancellation, and then you
Yep.
hit the phase again, and then
And
they
then
should.
flip it back.
Yeah,
Yep.
that
So
that
it's kind of a
works.
reductive process, isn't
Yeah,
it, doing
it
that?
is.
Yeah,
And there's also that 3:1 rule that if you like have them some distance away, then that second mic needs to be more than three times the distance between the first and the source or something like that. I could be
that's right.
getting it wrong, but yeah, I remember that like it was like engineering 101, you know.
And that's actually my favorite way to do it, right? You
Yeah,
put the 57 real close,
yep,
and then you put the Royer way back,
at the back.
like in the room.
Room.
And like we talked about last week, with that bit of room in a guitar sound is
Yeah,
what makes it sound natural. Do
it
you know what I
does.
mean?
Yeah, for sure. Totally. And so many of your favorite records, especially the live ones, the direct guitar source would be just part of the guitar sound. You've got your guitars leading into the drum mics and into your audience mics and so on and so forth, and all that adds up. And it's like the slight amount of phase cancellation actually makes a bigger overall
Yeah,
thing. And it kind of almost takes off the edges ever so slightly when you
yeah.
add the it's like putting a
Which is
reverb.
which is interesting, isn't it? Because people don't record in the same room very often anymore, right?
Oh man.
So that kind of thing, that kind of leakage that made it special,
Yep.
isn't really there anymore. Like, right, when was the last time you recorded in a room with a bunch of musicians together?
um a couple we did a live recording of a gig we had done
Ah,
a few months ago. But yeah, that was something like that. What I find also is useful, like especially when you're mixing, is if you have like that Ocean Wave room. It's a universal audio plugin, and one of the modes it's got is it can remic it. It's like miking that instrument again in that studio.
oh, cool.
So I find like if you use that like judiciously, you can
Mm-hmm.
kind of, start gluing together very disparate elements by just putting them in the same acoustic space.
Yeah,
So it's something I've started, playing around with, but it's a really deep plugin in that sense.
yeah.
They've got a whole bunch of different mics and different distances and different alignments in the studio and stuff like that. But it is a really cool technology which can kind of bring back, almost
Mm.
like substitute for having the players. But of course, I mean, there's musically as well. There's something else that happens when you're playing off people in the
Oh,
room.
absolutely.
You know,
And it's quicker,
yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
if you like, I found, when I do sessions, it's
Yep.
like the drummer does his or her part, and
Hmm.
that takes however many takes they do. Then the bass player has to spend about the same amount of time again. Then the keyboards, then the guitar.
Yep.
So if you add up all the time that you did together, you look
Hmm.
at it and you go, well, that took like 6 hours to do one track.
Yep.
But you could just play it down the first time together or a
Yep.
second time, and it's musically better.
Yeah.
I heard a thing about Van Halen, and it was one of the engineers, and he was talking about it, and he was saying that a Flash producer came in once those guys had had a bit of success and decided that he was going to get Eddie to overdub the guitar solos.
Right.
And then so they started playing, and then when it got to the solo section, Eddie, none of the band knew what to do. They got to the solo section and it basically just imploded.
Yeah.
And they went, no, you're going to have to do the solos live,
Yeah.
you know,
I think it
because
was the Gene Simmons demos that you may be talking about, because before they tracked their first album, they had this thing. They were approached by Gene Simmons to kind of take them under his wing and stuff. So he paid for some demos, which they I think later released as Van Halen Zero. During that time, he tried to tell him to just do the rhythm thing when they were doing the basic take and then overdub the
right.
solo. And he was like, I don't know how to do that. So, in fact, he would actually play the solo and then he would overdub the rhythm part just on the solo section.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Something like
But it
that.
was like it was. I mean, the thing
Yeah.
with it too is it's the interaction of drums against that guitar
Yeah.
solo. Like what Alex Van Halen was doing is as
Yeah.
much about the guitar solo as anything, and I found that interesting because I do a lot of overdub sessions and I've learned how to do them, but I much prefer just to play with people in the room together. It's
Yeah.
always better.
For me, my pet peeve is when they say, "Oh, just do it. We'll redo the bass later." You know, it's like,
Yeah,
but I
yeah,
need to react to the bass. That's like one of the first things I gravitate to is the drums and bass. If the bass is going to be a different thing, I will play differently, and then it may, you know, sometimes you hear back the thing and you're like, I wish I'd heard that in the first place. I would have just, you know, reacted a lot more differently to it.
I've
You
I've
know,
done a couple of big band albums like that where
yeah.
they're overdub big bands, so nobody's playing together. Most recent was a guy in Thailand did one like that,
Hmm.
and he got all these Flash people. There was a couple of New Yorkers. I forget who it was. People around the world were playing on this record. Anyway, we got all the parts, and he said, "Oh, we're going to do the drums last."
Right.
And I'm like, "What do you mean do the drums last?" He says, "Yeah, so we're going to do the drums last so the drummer can react to what everybody else is doing,
Yeah.
and it'll sound more natural." And I'm like, "Yeah, but then I'd change my parts," right? And it was like, so they had all these MIDI tracks of everybody's parts, and you basically just went in and replaced the MIDI part with your real part.
Right.
And then the drummer went and played his part afterwards. And then they came back to me and they said, "Oh, do you think you could redo your comping behind the solo? Because now the drummer's playing something different. Your comping needs to match up with what the drummer's doing." And I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah, we used to have this TV show in India called Coke Studio, which was like a live performance, high production values and everything like that. So I played on a few seasons. Now, season 2 and 3 were, full budgets and everything like that. So we had like heaps of rehearsal, and then, we played each song 3 times. We had 2 days of shoot per episode and so on. So I think by the time they came to the fourth season, the budgets may have run out. So they told me just, mail in your parts from home, which I did. I played whatever and I sent it to them and they got the mix together. And then I was like, but what about the video? Like it's a live performance thing that's short on video. They're saying, okay, like so you'll have to come in and mime your parts. So I think, okay, cool. The whole band's gonna be miming. No, they've shot the rhythm section on one different day, and for the guitar thing, they got me to sit here with the amp and frame and everything and say, okay, now the drummer's going to be sitting there. Can you just look
So
in
can you
that
look at him?
direction and nod and smile? I was like, how much of that can you recreate? I ended up looking like a goofy idiot, I assume. I didn't even like watch it.
Man, there's a classic story of a show in Wellington that was done like that, because TVNZ used to be, the main studio was in Wellington for many, many years, and there's certain artist, and I won't mention who it is, she got a guy to come in and play bass to mime, and he's not really a bass player. He's really more of a drummer. Actually, he owns really a hire company now more than anything.
Right.
But he's really a drummer as his main instrument. So, of course, he didn't play bass. So he's like going, like slapping all over the place and like being a real goof. So, of course, he breaks a string. And then he's like, stop the filming. I've broken a string. So he held everyone up while he put a new string on. And then he goes, okay, we can go again.
Oh, dear.
And it kind of became famous. Like, people were like, oh, that guy.
Have you ever done a miming gig?
Yes, I have. Like, about 25 years ago, this TV show, I think it was called The Tribe or something. And we were like the band in the background of like a dancing set of a film type thing,
Right.
So we just had to look like, they put us in tuxedos and just had to,
Nice.
and just pretend you're,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the only time I've ever done it though, that I can remember.
Yep.
Most of the time we'll just play it.
Yeah. But we once mimed on a TV award show because they didn't want like a whole band playing, so they kind of did the track beforehand. But I remember they actually made us come for sound check, and basically just a setup and a dress rehearsal kind of thing. Okay, you're going to stand here, whatever. And then for the actual performance thing, they just kept the two Marshall cabinets without the heads. I was like, aren't you going to put the tops? She said, no, it's fine. We just have the two speaker cabinets. So I was like, okay, what am I going to plug my guitar into? So I didn't even plug the guitar in. You can see it's unplugged, and I'm just...
That's funny as heck. Man, I had one. Actually, come to think of it, there was one other time I almost mimed on a program. I had this guitar solo to do for this program. It was called Karaoke High. It was an American production, but it was done in New Zealand, and all these Kiwis trying to speak like Americans. It was so bad. But it was I had this guitar solo to do, and it was like, it was like a chaos scene, like a big fight scene, and so the guitar got more and more angsty as I went along. But of course, I bite my fingernails. I have since I was, very, very little.
Yep.
And they were like, "Oh, we can't possibly do close-ups of your hands on the filming. So we'll pay someone else to come and learn your part, and then come in and do all the hand close-ups."
Right.
So it was funny. Like this friend of mine, Neil Becker, he had to go and learn my guitar solo,
Right.
and then he had to come in and film, just the hand close-ups, because I wasn't even seen either. Like, it was the actor was on stage, so he had to put the same shirt on that the actor had and did
Oh,
the
okay.
close-ups, and then they didn't use it.
Oh,
After all that,
okay.
there were no hand close-ups, so they just didn't use it. It was like, oh, come on.
Yeah, I've had to do that
Yeah.
a couple of times, like where they've already shot the guy playing, and I think it was just like an a cappella kind of thing. So I kind of had to imagine what he would have been playing if he knew to play guitar
Mm,
and do something like that. Those are the
yeah.
times where, like, you actually feel like you are, doing something for the money,
Yeah, yeah,
actually doing
totally.
some proper work.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny, that same show, I remember, but there was one scene the actor had to do too, and he could play a little bit of guitar, so
Right,
he did like the strumming thing, but he couldn't do the right hand.
right.
He didn't have that part, but he could kind of hold the chords enough.
Yeah,
So what we did was they put him in a seat,
yeah,
and they cut a hole in his sleeve
right.
back here, and they fed his arm down the side.
Wow.
And I came from behind him and put my hand through his hole in his sleeve and came out the guitar. And I did the right hand while he did the left hand and all
Wow.
that. And they positioned it just right so you couldn't see me. And of course, we played it and it looked flawless.
Right.
And then I stood up from behind him. So they had this bloopers thing that they used to show on TVNZ, and all the
Right.
time that was the one they'd say, things aren't what they seem, and this guy would be strumming, and then I stand up. You know?
Nice one. You
I should
became,
see if I can find it. I'll send it to you. It's bloody funny.
you become a meme then finally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You,
And it looked like real because his skin coloring was about the same as mine. He had the same amount of hair on his arm, so it
right.
didn't look, and it was bloody funny.
So you
But
basically
man,
became
we
a
used to
hand
be out
model.
there. Yeah, exactly. Used to be out there like, but that was funny because they wouldn't allow close-ups of my hands. Yet
Uh-huh.
the strumming hand was fine. But it was funny. We used to be out at TVNZ every week,
Right.
doing shows like that. Like, used to be heaps of those gigs, and now they do the Lotto there, and I think they do the TAB or something like that. That's about
Right.
it. And it's all moved up to Auckland where you are.
Okay.
But in Auckland, they don't have any big studios. They've only got the smaller studios, so they can't do a lot of the live band things. They just don't have the facility for it.
Yeah.
It's a real shame because that TVNZ facility out in Wellington was, it was really humming.
Yeah.
But I believe it's been used. The main studio, Studio 9, I think it's 8, whatever it was called, is being where Avatar's being filmed.
Okay.
So apparently they're using it for that. So at least it's getting used. But man, those were the days, eh? All those TV gigs, like all the time. We were out there all the time, just
Yeah.
doing stuff. It was great.
I once did a short stint on a comedy show, like as the band, like when they would have the Jay Leno show, for example, like they had a band playing, and so the thing every punchline, sometimes they wanted me to play a chord, like it would just go, something like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And the thing is, the guy spoke like really fluent Hindi, and my Hindi is not the best. So they actually had a girl that every time there was a punchline drop, she would wave her hands, and I would like, because I didn't even know if it was a joke or not.
Oh man, a friend of mine was telling me Roger Sellers. He's not with us anymore. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he used to live in England. He told me he played on a porn set one time. And
Live action.
yeah, like live band playing by a swimming pool. Band on one side of the swimming pool, the couple on the other side of the swimming pool.
Well, a gig is a gig.
It's getting paid.
Exactly.
Wonder if the guitar player was playing wah wah.
Probably was.
Probably.
Which are your Wawa influences? Well, those.
Yeah. Is there any other type?
Oh, wow.
That's pretty much it, right?
Pretty
No.
much.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Anything cool coming up this weekend for you?
Yeah, I've got on Friday I'm playing my double drum funk gig.
Oh, nice.
So again with the keyboard player and 2 drummers both on drum kits. So Darren Mathiasen, who and
Yep.
Jacob Randall are both playing on that one. So
Amazing.
it should be fun because they're both monsters,
Yeah.
And Paul Leo and I will. I'm going to bring my earplugs this time though, man. 'Cause, man, Jacob plays loud. Like he puts his earplugs in and then he just tortures everyone else.
I was gonna say that, I mean, it's not so much you wearing earplugs, as if the drummer's wearing earplugs, then you're in for a hard time.
Well, and they don't know how hard they're hitting because
Exactly.
they've got no perspective on how loud they actually are and how
Yeah.
painful it can be, you know. And now I've got two of them,
Yeah. In
so I
stereo.
think I'll just bring my earplugs. 'Cause, man, my ears were ringing. But the trio, like last time, was like it was awesome. Like it was really. I went away from the gig going, that felt like a really fun gig.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely I'll try and get some footage on my GoPro and
Oh yeah.
yeah. But I'm looking forward to this Friday night. It's just a little club. It's a really small place. And then actually a friend of mine's actually in from Melbourne on a cruise ship. So we're
Okay.
going to go up and he's playing guitar on a cruise ship. So we're just going to go and meet for lunch on Saturday. So it'd be nice to catch up with him and talk guitar stuff and see what he's been up to. He's just got a new endorsement with a company called Saito.
Okay.
Saito. I hadn't heard of them before, but he's got this beautiful Telecaster style guitar with a sort of it's got an interesting kind of F hole. It's more like concentric circles that get bigger.
Okay.
And it's got like the headstock kind of looks a bit like a Tyler.
Right.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. So I'll no doubt I'll see that on Saturday. So I'll be interested to see his new guitar.
Nice.
So yeah. Yeah, so what about yourself? You got any gigs?
No, none this weekend. So I'm actually gonna, if the weather's good, we'll probably take off, somewhere for a bit of a drive, maybe a swim or something. We had the Auckland anniversary holiday on Monday,
Oh
so
yeah.
we kind of looked at the sky in the morning and it was overcast as it usually is. But then afternoon it started clearing up, so we made like a quick decision. Let's quickly nip down to the beach, and luckily there's a couple of nice ones within half an hour's drive away. So it
Oh man,
was,
Auckland, you've got some great beaches
Yeah.
not far from you too. My grandparents used to live in Matakana, or just out of Matakana,
Yeah.
a little place called Whangatiao. I don't know if you know Whangatiao. It's kind of between Matakana and Lee, but we always
Yep.
say Matakana. And so I spent every Christmas up there when I was a kid.
Oh, nice.
And those beaches are stunning.
Yeah.
Man, it's
Our
so
favorite's
nice.
Lee because of the fish and chips. There's a really nice shop there, and there's
And
a
the Lee
nice
Sawmill, right?
yeah.
If
The-
it's still even going.
No, I think the sawmill may have closed down. I think a friend may have mentioned that. I could be wrong. Maybe just change management or something. But there's a nice beach there called Matheson Bay, and
That's my
yeah.
favorite beach.
Yeah.
My grandfather literally used to go swimming there every day.
Okay.
Because there's a reef just slightly offshore, so
Yeah.
you don't get the big waves coming. It's a really good swimming beach.
Yeah.
I love Matheson's Bay. It's really lovely.
Yeah, awesome.
Stunning.
So maybe if the weather permits, we'll pop down this weekend and see how
Yeah.
that goes.
Just one thing I was thinking about too.
Yeah.
Did you see the NAMM show we were talking about that earlier?
Yeah.
That Neural DSP had no booth, and they just put a sign up saying soon.
Oh, really?
That's what they did for the whole NAMM show. It just said SON, and on the N it had the neural
Logo.
spike, the waveform looking
Yep.
thing, and that was it. And the booth was quite big, so they would have spent a whole lot of money on the booth. And I was like, "What? Like, that's pretty lame." That doesn't speak well to them because, with the Quad Cortex, they promised all these things. Like they promised an editor, and you didn't get one until I think it's only just recently come for the Quad Cortex.
Right.
And then they've got a NAMM booth, but they don't even... I'm like, what the hell?
I think most of the users, they want to be able to use the plugins on the hardware, which I don't think you can do yet. So, yeah, I guess once that happens, But again, I'm most excited about that neural amp
Genome?
modeler. There's a company in Europe, I think I mentioned, that's making a thing that will going to host it at very low latency. So
Is that the 2 Notes one?
No. This is Neural Amp Modeler is a free plugin. The one I was
Yeah,
talking
no,
about.
I know the one that you've
So now
mentioned.
this company is some guy in Europe who's basically latched onto that platform, and you'd be able to load those profiles into it. And maybe they'll throw in some effects or something as well. But
Yeah.
2 Notes, the one you mentioned, I think, is Genome, right? That
Yeah,
lets
the
you-
Genome that's
yeah,
just come
yeah,
out as it will
host.
load
Yeah.
neural amp modelers
I
profiles
just
into
looked at my account, and I think I was a beta tester as well at an early stage. So they've put the software in my account, so I'm going to download it and have a bit of a play on that.
Oh,
We'll see how
cool.
we go. Because I've got the neural amp things already saved on my thing, so I'll just load them and see. how you go. Their cabs are really nice. Those Dyne IRs or whatever they call them. Because I got the Friedman ones. There's one particular one which is 4x12 with G12 65s. I think it's just called the G12 Vintage. And that's a great sounding cabinet. So that used to be like a go-to before I got the aux, but there's still like some stuff where I'll record just, not with the aux and just put the two notes on it later. So it's good to have choices, pretty
Cool, man.
much. Cool. So let's catch up.
Should we sign off? Because we've been about an hour, haven't we?
Yep. So
Man, it's great chatting with you. I always enjoy this.
the time just flies, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? We've been an hour and I didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
So thank you everybody for watching and listening to us talk. In my case, a whole lot of bullshit, and Warren saying a whole lot of stuff that's like really logical. So I'll stop recording now.
Yeah, we can. Sure. See you next week.
Okay. See you next week. Bye.